You have stumbled upon or perhaps intentionally ended up here at my podcast, Actual Leigh. No matter the path that led you here, I hope that you will hang out and join me for a truly enjoyable conversation. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to Actual Leigh. We are here with A Tower,
Hey, how are you?
and yeah, that's it. I hope everybody's been having a good week, and thanks for hanging out with us. Anyway, so yeah, we were talking about before I started recording, we were talking about parallel play, which is it's a way of like quality time together that autistic people tend to appreciate more than I guess neurotypical people do. Although I feel like, there's probably neurotypical people might enjoy it as well, and they just don't necessarily need it as much, right?
Right.
But parallel play for people who aren't familiar is basically the idea is like you could be sitting in a room with somebody and you're doing your own thing and they're doing their own thing, and you're not ignoring each other, you're actually spending time with each other while doing your own thing, and that is a form of quality time. And some people are very uncomfortable doing that with that silence and stuff. They feel like they're being rejected or whatever. And for some people like myself, it means I feel very safe with somebody, and that it can be very recharging for me to it actually makes me easier for me as well to do shit, because it kind of turns into the body doubling thing as well.
Really? See,
Yeah.
I it occurs to me that I've never done that, but I've also only hung out and been around neurotypicals. So I've never actually had to do that because, like you were saying, neurotypicals tend to get really uncomfortable. And I don't know, while I'm listening to you describe it, I'm thinking to myself, like, that sounds kind of odd, like, that uncomfortable silence. And part of me is wondering if that's just like because I've been around neurotypicals mostly my whole life, if I'm not like kind of programmed to think like that, because they do not do uh, the silences. Like they feel like
Yeah.
they're being ignored, or they feel like you don't really want to talk to them or something. And I mean, I'm just focused on something else. So parallel play sounds like something I'd try it, and see how I felt
Yeah.
about it. But
Yeah. I mean, I have noticed, like, because we talk a lot in text, that you are sort of programmed with this hypervigilance to sort of anticipate people reading into things. And that is the trauma that comes from being around neurotypical people, right?
yes,
Is not being taken at face value, and then never knowing what if people mean what they say. And yeah, it's so yeah, I feel like you are a neglected neurodivergent because you have
oh yeah,
missed out in being able to be yourself, like with other people that have, similar wiring and stuff. So,
yeah. I
um,
mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's funny because I feel so much like I'm a neurodivergent, sort of living amongst the normies and trying to and I've been raised kind of like as a normie, so I've had to learn kind of their ways, and some of it is almost hard to unravel too. You know what I mean? Because I mean, I'm 37, so this has been 37 years of sort of being trained to think like they do, and
Yeah,
it's
it's like forcing. It's almost like you're being forced into like a clay mold to be someone you're not, and in such a way where you weren't really given the opportunity to even know what your original form was, right?
yeah, and uh, to me, just I really honestly couldn't tell you what my natural sort of intuitive, way to be would would be. I hate repeating words, but yeah, I've had to like learn how to read people's intentions because they don't tell you,
Yeah.
and uh, now I'm wondering like if I never had to do that, would I still do that? Sort of like I'm guessing not automatically.
Yeah.
But there you go. There's something for me to work on in therapy. Is trying to unravel my neurotypical programming that's been
Right.
installed in me.
It's so hard. I mean, I'm on the other side of the social spectrum in which I live in an area where there's like a large percentage of neurodivergent people. There's like a lot of autistic people came here for the tech industry, and so I just have always had friends that I didn't even know that I was ADHD or autistic or anything, right? But I always was just drawn to these people. And I would just be like, wow, I really, feel like I relate to them. And sometimes, they would be like, wow, you communicate like it's so much easier to communicate with you than with other people. And it was like the hints were always like there. And then when I started learning about autism in earnest, it was like, and then I was like, I think I might be autistic. And some of my autistic friends were like, you didn't know? Like,
Right, right,
So there's a certain amount that I think I just have always been lucky to be more relaxed. And then there's like the other stuff that I'm still trying to learn to kind of decouple myself from and get it, like, learn, like, is this me? Is that not me, um and the more I start to kind of recognize when my programming to be hyper vigilant is taking place, and then I go, I'm not going to act on that. I recognize that the hypervigilance is kicking in, so I'm going to step back and see what happens. and and then it's like that's where I start getting into trouble because I'm not hand holding with other people like they're used to, right? And this starts
right.
creating communication issues that I'm just like, well, you could have said what you meant.
Yeah, but that's such a foreign concept. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me why you would say something that you don't actually mean,
Right,
or to talk in code or talk around things. Just say it. Just address it directly. It's not
right.
hard. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable at first, sure, but I mean,
And
normies,
I legit think that like there is this programming with neurotypicals to avoid not being compatible with other people, right? So they're not direct or honest because they don't want to face the reality that maybe they're just not compatible with those people. Oh no, I don't fit in. Who fucking cares? Go find the
right,
people you fit in with, right? Like,
right.
because it's like that need to fit. And I think like when you're wired a little bit differently, you just don't have that same, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people who still have that. I just, for some reason, I didn't. It's like I just was so different when I was younger. I never tried to fit in because I was like, I can't. I cannot do whatever the fuck it is those people are doing. Like, you know?
See, no, I hear what you're saying. It's almost like I've been on the other side where I've never had. Uh, I know that I've interacted with neurodivergent people. I just didn't know it, right? But I mean, also, I didn't get diagnosed until what 2022, I believe. Uh, so this is a new thing for me. I mean, we're going on 3 years now, uh, and so I've always felt like the alien, the outsider, and it's always been because I need people and I like having people. I'm a chatty Cathy, man. I just talk and talk and talk, and I love to talk with people. It's draining on me, but it's also, I don't know, I just have a passion for it. And it's always been something that I really enjoy. And it's only been recently that I can actually acknowledge and admit that to myself. It's been empowering, though, to be able to
Yeah.
admit that. And so, growing up all throughout my life, it's always been I need people, but I don't have the right people. You were talking about you would meet other neurodivergent, and it was like you found your people. You know what I mean? Where you can interact with them, and you just got along really well. Uh, I've always had to kind of mold myself around them so that I can fit in with them because I need that social interaction.
Right.
And and now, especially lately, I'm really wondering what kind of damage did that do? You know what I mean? What has that done to me that has created, from those interactions where, I've had to be hyper vigilant, and now it's almost like, obviously I'm programmed to do that,
Right.
and trying to, how much further does it go? Is it beyond hypervigilance? I really doubt it's just one thing. So
Yeah.
that's something that I've, been thinking about a lot. And it's been interesting being able to like talk with you because you're neurodivergent too. And it's been really helpful because, like I said, I don't have any in real life neurodivergence around me. So pretty much like you and two or three other people, I can actually have social interactions where I don't have to be, masking as neurotypical me. And
Yeah.
it's nice, to be honest. But I still have, because I'm so used to interacting with neurotypicals, taking off that mask can be difficult. And you're always wondering if you're going to be rejected and stuff. So,
Yeah.
and I know that rejection sensitivity is a big, big thing for autistics. Some random profile on Blue Sky, I believe, was talking about how rejection sensitivity is actually should be part of the diagnosis for autism. I don't know how that works. I didn't really pursue it much further, but it just kind of got me thinking. Like, yeah, we really are constantly, living amongst them, feeling like we're the outsiders, we're the aliens,
Right. Yeah,
and
it I think rejection sensitive dysphoria is like because people with ADHD are also really prone to it. I think it should be treated as a common comorbidity rather than a diagnostic criteria. It's
sure,
just, that would be my opinion on that. But I think like what you were saying earlier about like unpacking your experiences and what kind of impact that's had on you and stuff like that. Like I think it's really hard to know until you've had the opportunity to like unmask, right? And like learn who you actually are without that mask. I mean, even like when I talk to people that I know, like when you and I are talking, we have like very similar pathways for thinking about things sometimes, which is very
yeah,
interesting. Because that doesn't happen that often, but I'll still sometimes just say something without the mask and I'll get very anxious, like because it's like a learned thing that if I say something like that's going to be offensive to somebody, right? And I've
yeah,
just been learning to let things be there, and I'll still have that like anxiety reaction, but I let other people deal with it, and if they're offended, we can have a conversation, and if they don't say anything and they're offended, that's their fault, and if they take it fine, then cool, right? And
right,
that's where I've been like kind of forcing myself into these sort of like discomfort spots so that I can shape my interactions like me, so I can be shaped like me when I'm doing stuff a little bit more, right?
yeah,
And
exactly. Go ahead.
and I still don't totally know. Like, there's some things about me that I'm like, yes, this is me, and then there's some things I'm like, I have no idea. Like,
Oh yeah.
I don't.
See, and that's something I've talked to, therapists over the years about. It's like, you're trying to parse out who you are really from, who you have had to pretend to be, and at some point you almost feel like that mask has become your face.
Right.
And, I'm constantly wondering, is that me or is that my mask? And I've always struggled with that concept of me, my identity. Who am I? And like I was talking about, being able to admit to myself that I like to talk to people and I like to be social. That's part of me discovering me, right?
Hmm.
Like that's part of that discovery process, and finding the real me underneath. And
Yeah.
it's been it's been nice. It's terrifying at times. And you were talking about rejection, and when you take off that mask, that anxiety. You know, I think being with other neurotypicals or being among neurotypicals, there is that hesitation because we've been taught that as soon as we start being the real us, right? or start letting that mask slip down just a little bit, we're instantly rejected, you know. And not to tell you your experiences or whatever, but I know personally for me, that's part of that. You know, if I'm feeling anxious or I'm questioning what I'm saying, or is this the right thing to respond with, you know, trying to learn how to speak other people's languages. I also think that trying to learn other people's languages is also perhaps part of my learned behaviors, you know, along with like the people pleasing and stuff, because of that rejection trauma throughout, you know, my life. And I would assume, since it seems to be common amongst neurodivergents, so, you know, trying to unpack that and figure those things out, it's been a
It's a
journey.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exciting, but it's also like, for me, like just knowing that there's a reason why I obsessively daydreamed about being an alien when I was a kid, like, and
Yeah.
that's apparently a very common experience for autistic people is they literally feel like aliens. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
oh,
Yeah. It's almost like it's not just it's not just me. I'm not weird. I'm not that, you know, that I'm not really an outsider. There are people out there. I'm just an outsider, perhaps in this situation, type of deal.
Right.
Do you ever like, I know just speaking from, you know, my own sort of experience, I love to look up at the sky, right? Especially at night. And I just
Yeah.
look, and it was so weird. It's like when I look up there, it almost feels like that's more home than here.
Hmm.
And it's such a weird thing to say, and I kind of feel embarrassed for saying that, but really, like, I've always felt more like that's more where I belong. That's more home than here amongst these humans, you know.
Yeah. I used to sneak out of the house to just go to the park and lay on the monkey bars and look at the sky, like in the middle of the night. It's like other people they snuck out, they go out to get drunk, and I'm like, I'm gonna go look at the stars. But
Dude,
it's not so much that I felt like more at home out there, so much as it gave me this like perspective of being in the universe and being in the universe, being this tiny little speck of dust in this like thing that's beyond what I could fathom is like comforting to me because it makes like everything else that's awful in the world around me just feel like it's no more important than I am, right?
right.
And that like, I fit in that way. That's kind of my like what it's always done for me, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally understand that. I mean, Carl Sagan, right? Pale blue dot, you know, and
Yeah.
I think that was I think that picture was the cover. It's actually an interesting story. He got a lot of crap for wanting to take that picture of Earth from
Hmm.
so far away because it takes so long to turn the satellite camera around. Uh, but yeah, it kind of puts things into perspective, you know.
Right.
For you know, I constantly look around, and all I see are just arbitrary systems that people have just built, and we put so much importance on them, and they are to a degree. But I mean, these are all just things we made. They're going to crumble at some point, right? And then we're
Right.
going to build new ones, you know, better ones, whatever. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if we ever lived in caves, but I know we lived in like plains and we probably had some type of shelter. And now we have houses. You know, this is all just, it's all just so not meaningless, but kind of in a way, you know,
Yeah.
is
Well, it's so like I always like think of society as just being like a series of agreements that everybody in society agrees to, right? Like
right.
language is a series we've all agreed that hamburger means hamburger, like, you know,
Exactly.
and it's like, yeah, okay, we've agreed to that, so it has that meaning as far as that, but it also shows how arbitrary it is because language changes all the time and what's important, especially now that we have all this technology, so we have all this information, the priorities are constantly changing, and if people could just relax a little bit about that shit, like instead of being like, I gotta have control, like,
Right. And you know, it's so weird that people and that kind of ties to, I usually think about this concept in terms of morality, right? Everybody, well, not everybody, but I hear a lot of people seem to be insistent on this concept of objective. And I mean, aside from like scientific laws, even those aren't truly objective, right? I mean, and it's like humans seem to have this weird need for something to be solid all the way through. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Being rock solid, you know, no matter what. And it's just a bizarre concept because things that are rigid and immovable like that, the concept of objective by itself seems sort of contrary to the way things actually work, right? Because if it's
Yeah,
rigid, it's never going to adapt, it's never going to change, it's never going
it's
to
gonna
evolve.
break.
Yeah, and it necessarily has to. Things that are rigid and don't evolve past a point, they don't continue on to create, other species or whatever.
Right.
And especially in terms of morality, why would you want an objective morality? I mean, I can kind of see the comfort in that, but I mean, it's usually in arguments with like the concept of gods and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
mean, you get what I'm saying? Like, it just seems, I don't know, like, why do you need something that is for sure? You know?
Yeah. Well, I think like so my perception of people who cling to these absolutes is that they themselves are insecure and they feel unsafe because they're insecure. And so they rely on this sort of external set of like rules as a way to like, so this falls into to my argument for teaching emotional intelligence at a young age as just being part of our sort of social thinking is, if we raise children to be more self-aware, to be more emotionally intelligent, and to have like a sense of like ownership and responsibility for their impact, right? Like I think that it would help somewhat in that stuff because there'd be more people who were more secure in themselves, and so they'd feel less of a drive to control others in order to feel okay, you know?
Yeah,
Um, it's
it's
it's there's like people are constantly trying to control the symptoms of problems instead of looking at the actual problems. And it drives me crazy. I'm just like, but that's not the problem. That's just you being like a doctor. Stop. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I mean, maybe I think there's validity to that idea. It's almost like they need control because they feel so out of control, and if they're
yeah,
taught that, you're not in control of as much as you actually think you are, I sincerely believe that, and that's okay, right?
yeah,
Because
exactly,
the things you can control, you can use that control to adapt and get ready to, tackle the new challenges or whatever, I guess.
exactly. Yeah,
Um,
I think like having that adaptability through having the self-awareness and the emotional intelligence to be able to self-soothe and all that allows for somebody to have resilience. And I think that that's what's missing for a lot of people is that lack of resilience. They just have a really hard time adapting to like changes, both socially and in their own lives and stuff. And I'm like, that's like my biggest thing is you can think what you want, you can believe what you want, but don't try to control other people. Control yourself, make your choices for yourself, and let everybody else do whatever the fuck they want to do. Like,
yeah,
period. You know, it's as
it's
long as you're not hurting anybody, like,
exactly,
it's,
and
yeah,
it's I don't understand these. It, it's funny because we're told as autistics that no, it's us that has the rigid thinking issues, and it's, excuse me, like, are you
I
kidding
think,
me?
yeah, I think it goes, I think everybody's got rigid thinking issues. It's just where it's applied, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. And it it almost feels like to me like so many of the criteria that they use to diagnose autism, it's almost like uh, looking in the mirror and accusing the reflection of being wrong. Oh, we're not supposed to be. We're supposed to be emotionally. I don't know what the term is. It was. I don't know. I internalized it as like deficient, And it's like, no, bro, like I feel emotions just fine. I just process them and express them differently. Right. I
Yeah.
feel those emotions. And in a lot of cases, I think we experience emotions much stronger
Yeah.
than
And
neurotypicals do.
there's a lot of conversation around that like our perception of both what we feel in our bodies physically and emotionally and stuff, that we tend to have a more intense relationship and experience with it, you know. And that's obviously, it's not true. There are autistic people that have the opposite, where they have no idea what they're feeling, right? But
Absolutely.
it's yeah, it's that, like, the double empathy issue is very interesting to me, because when it comes down to it, it's like the default brain language between the two groups is just different enough that we have a hard time empathizing with each other if we don't make the effort to speak each other's language. That's really, like, that's where the deficit is that we have to do all the work to, like, understand them, but they don't try to understand us.
Absolutely. And, we were talking about this earlier, right? They don't say what they mean and they don't express it. And we can't always read those expressions.
But they can't either. That's the thing that trips me out, is you'll get these conversations with them, or a disagreement, or you communicate something, and then they say, "Okay, I hear you." And then they go on with, like, the day, and then later they do whatever again, and it's like, didn't we already talk about this? Because you said you heard me, but they never clarified. They just assumed that they understood based on I don't know what, because it's not,
But
it's there's like no continuity to the conversation, and I'm just like, I can't even word it very well right now, because it's so flabbergasting that
yeah. And see, and this, it's amazing that when you're just honest and you just say things plainly, it's almost like we don't have to do this again, right?
right?
And
Exactly.
and I've noticed that sometimes, even in myself, I'll say, yeah, sure, whatever. Uh, and that's just kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's sort of like a term of acknowledge, and then we can move on. And in my experiences, those, it's like, yeah, I heard you, I understand. They're just saying, I acknowledge that you said a thing, not
They're
I internal.
placating. That's how
Yeah.
I interpret it. It's placating, and it's dishonest, because the understanding is not actually there. And so, like, they never made the effort to, like, if someone says I heard you, but they don't communicate back to me what they heard,
Hmm.
I think they're lying to me.
Yeah.
I just don't believe them. And the thing is like, as autistics, we get in trouble for asking questions to get more information so that we can understand. But the whole reason for understanding is so that we can take care of what the other person was saying to us. Like, if they have a need, we then understand the need and we can fulfill it. And it's like, do neurotypical people just walk around in their lives never having their needs met and never meeting anybody else's needs? Is that, like, what, why they're so unhappy? I don't,
Probably. I
like,
got to
how
be
do they
honest.
figure, because the basis of couples therapy is actually learning how to communicate in a more open and honest way, where you can hear the other person without the filter of, like, who you imagine them to be, right? So they're
Right.
basically learning how to communicate in a way that autistic people often do by default.
Yeah.
Like,
And and it's I just I know obviously my social circle primarily consists of neurotypicals. So they are super unhappy, and it's always like, oh, I said this thing and then they didn't listen, or they didn't follow what I was trying to say, they didn't acknowledge. And it's because they're not saying the thing. Just say the thing. I've said this and you've said it,
yeah, just say the thing.
yeah,
And
just
then,
say the
like,
thing.
and then communicate back what you heard and make sure that you're on the same page. And then you don't have to keep doing it over and over again, because if you don't do that, then it's not clear if the person is being an abusive asshole and not listening to you, or if you guys are just not on the same page. It's like, you know,
Absolutely. And it's mind blowing too, because I'll have so many different conversations with friends and they'll talk about their partner and, the communication issues and stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, you're not talking to each other honestly. You're not being upfront, and you know, I just don't.
Yeah.
And
That
it's
whole
like,
like the thing you said earlier about learning people's language, one of the
mhm,
traps that I've fallen into, and I know we've talked about this, is that I, at a very young age, had learned enough about human behavior that I could play the therapist friend, right? So even though in my life I don't have a lot of close relationships and I've never really felt like I fit in, I understand what all these other people were doing enough to be able to like hear them, make them feel heard in a way they're not used to, and then give them like feedback that they could take to make their lives better. Like I tend to be a catalyst for change when I become friends with people, and then I help them, and then they could move on with their lives. Okay, bye. You know, and
exactly,
it's it's like it's so interesting. I've stopped doing that. Like I see the opportunity to lean in, and I just go, they're not paying me. you know.
exactly. You know, I've had similar experiences where it's like I'll just talk to people, and later on they'll be like, "You have no idea how much you helped me. You got me ready for this." And it's like, that's great. I'm glad I was your trainer human or whatever. Uh, and then they kind of, because they're going off and having different
Right,
relationships, and they don't really need me around as the friend anymore because I was apparently there as this surrogate therapist or
right.
something. I don't know. And
Yeah,
that gets a little frustrating for
it
sure.
does. It's um like I would always invite these people in to do stuff. I'd have like game nights or go do stuff or whatever, and it never went the other way. And I just never really got it. It's like, and then when I got sick and everybody just kind of went away, except for a couple of my friends who stuck around, it was like, oh, okay. I was serving a purpose. I wasn't really like a person to them.
Yeah.
And it was like the rudest lesson to have when I was at like the worst in my life, was to be like, oh, all these
Right.
people that I was constantly doing stuff for, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
And they'll say that we have a problem with reciprocity. It's like, are you fucking kidding, dude? Like, we give just all the time. And then
yeah,
you guys have no problem fucking off. Like,
yeah.
and
I was like, when I started getting diagnosis and I was like gutted and I was like driving my car crying after going to the doctors, I had nobody to call. But all of those people, I was there with them for appointments. I took people to PT. I like, like I was like, okay,
yeah,
well,
exactly.
yeah,
You know, it, I was there for you, but you weren't there for me. But, apparently
yeah,
I'm the bad friend or something, and I've had that experience. It's kind of fresh. So I can think about it. It's like I was there for another person, and I thought they were my friend, but then I started to realize that we were only talking about them. We were only talking about what they were having trouble with. And every time I would bring up mine, they would change they would
hmm,
switch the conversation. They would change the subject, or they would just dismiss it,
yeah,
and it's like, motherfucker, I've been sitting here listening to you, and I've been humoring you, even though in my mind I'm like, this is fucking stupid and this is silly and I don't know why you care. And then the minute I start talking about something that's very serious to me, it's like, yeah, but this, or well, that's just silly. Or excuse me, I said my real name.
Oh shit, I know your name. I won't
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
tomorrow. It's
No,
okay.
no, it's fine. I just that's my government name, man.
Yeah,
So it's not the name I
it's
prefer.
your future dead name.
Yeah, I hope so, man. Because I really just don't identify with my actual name. I
Right.
really identify with the name that I've given myself, which is actually
Ooh.
funny because the name that I prefer was actually the name that I was going to be named before my parents chose this other name. And it's like,
Yeah.
man, you should have kept that name, and I wouldn't have to go through all this rigmarole to change it. You know,
Right. Yeah. I legally changed my name and it was a process, but it was worth it. So it,
see,
yeah. I was gonna say, like, I have a friend who I've known for quite a while who's also neurodivergent, and the conversations are always about them. And
Oh
to
yeah.
the extent that like in the beginning I didn't get it. Like I was just like, oh, they're talking to me and not that many people talk to me and it's nice to have this noise in my life.
Right.
And then it was like when I tried to say stuff, they either didn't respond to it at all or they'd be like, yeah, I'll catch up on this later. Or they would say some generic like, like, oh, well, people suck, that kind of thing. But when I
Right.
respond to anything that they say, I'm very like comprehensive with paragraphs. I put even sometimes it's stuff I don't care about. I'm like, I literally don't want to talk about this, but they're my friends, so I'm going to put the effort into this topic and give them like feedback. And it just like I recently just kind of stopped.
Right.
So, but they continue. I get these books of texts and I just don't respond because I'm like, I'm not taking up any space in this. Also, I found out that they copy and paste what they send to their other friends. So I used to think that they were confiding in me, and it ends up that they're looking for cheerleaders. Because if you disagree with them, they get mad. So
Oh
it
yeah.
was like, oh yeah. My therapist's like, why are you friends with this person again? I was like, well, they're the only person that talks to me regularly, and I'm lonely, so I guess that's part of it. But you
Right.
know.
And uh, the copy paste things. What do you? Were they a cop? What the hell? What is this? Why would you do that? Like,
I only do that with jokes. Like if I have a good fart story, I'll copy and
right.
paste that to my friends, but it's to make them laugh. It's not like if I only have like I don't really talk to very many people about things in my life that much. It's not
Right.
like when people are like, "Oh, if you need someone to talk to," I'm like, I, mm.
Not
But
you.
yeah, it's not, I
Mm.
just don't, it doesn't make me feel better to talk to people about stuff. It's not, it doesn't fix. I mean, like if I was to text you, I'd be like, oh, blah, 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 my health issues. Like, what is that going to fix? Nothing. Right? It doesn't make me feel any better. It just makes me feel worse because I was thinking about it. I would prefer to disassociate and do something else. So,
No, no.
you know,
I get it.
yeah, but it's so like, I forgot what I was saying.
I do that all the time. I've done it several times in this conversation. You can kind of tell because my eyes kind of probably go blank. You know.
So- but yeah, the just the I don't know, there's something very impersonal about that. It's, there's just a time and place for it, but when you're confiding in somebody, which I guess that's not what they were doing, I don't know. I is a strange dynamic there that
That
it
is a.
was like,
I
yeah.
I would probably just like, okay, well, we're only going to have conversations that are superficial to a high degree because just
Yeah.
personally, like you were saying, that's very impersonal. Like
Yeah.
I thought we were deeper than that. You know,
Right.
did you say that they were neurotypical or neurodivergent?
Neurodivergent. Yeah,
No
just
shit.
ADHD. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm just thinking to myself, if they were neurotypical, I'm like, and they would say that we're the ones that have the robotic, responses, and we're not
Yeah.
personable or whatever. And it's like, are literally copy pasting just random stuff.
Right.
And if you're gonna do that, why not do like Keats? Like, go with like poetry or something. If you're just gonna rip
Right.
people off, I mean, just do that. So, but I guess you got to have that thin veneer of pretending like you're actually, being intimate with somebody else and having an intimate conversation.
Yeah.
So,
Well, my perception was that they're just because they'll get into these cycles of drama with people in their lives, so they're sharing the drama with different people, and I think they're seeking out cheerleader type responses. They think everybody's going to agree with them, so then
right.
you know, and I was slow on the uptake for that particular dynamic. And once I figured it out, then I just stopped participating, partially because the few times I was really honest about what I thought, what they got very not happy with me. So they got mad at me. There's like no space for disagreement. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna, and so I do keep everything very like surfacey, and
Yeah.
I don't really,
And I don't fault you for that, man. I would too. I'd be like,
yeah,
especially if you ask me for a thing and I give you honest feedback and you just reject it, obviously I can see what your goals are in telling me that.
exactly.
right? You just want me
Exactly.
to tell you that you didn't do anything wrong. You're fine, right? Oh no, you're totally cool, dude. Don't worry about that. Oh no, and
Yep.
you know, what's the point in doing that? You know, you can. I'm sure you can find an AI bot that'll just do that for you. So
Exactly. It's like, yeah, so I mean, I think that's part of it for me why I don't go to people for stuff is because I don't want their feedback. Like,
yeah,
because like what are people going to say about the things that I have going on in my life that like I haven't already thought, you know? Or they're
right.
going to say something like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then it's going to trigger me and I'm going to be angry for a week. So, you know.
See, we've had that conversation where I've made that mistake a couple times, you know, and I would hope that my intentions are there, but you know, I've also learned that that's not positive for you, so I don't do it anymore. It still feels
Yeah.
kind of weird at times because it's like my immediate, you know, impulse is to say that, but I'm also like, no, you don't say that. It's
Yeah, it's but and that's like that's a benefit of of having autistic friends
mm-hmm,
is they take the time to learn about you and they can adapt for you, right? Like it
right,
becomes more personalized. And the thing is like if I say something and you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry," but it's bundled into your intention, it doesn't, my brain kind of goes, I don't like those words, but I focus on the intention. It doesn't bother me. It's the people that
okay,
just say, I'm so sorry, and they don't say anything else. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? It's an
right,
empty container full of that person's intent, but I don't know what their intent is because they didn't say it. So they're relying on
exactly,
me to fill it up with the assumption of whatever I need to hear, but I need to hear authenticity from other people. Like
absolutely,
if
yeah,
if if it's just about what I need to hear and I don't care about what other people's intentions, I'm not going to talk to anybody, right?
right,
It's like I think people don't realize how important that really authentic empathy and compassion can be where you say what you mean, which is literally all the meaning that's packed into the social script. Just unpack it. And that's what I
right.
want, and apparently that's too much. So
Yeah. And I'm wondering, you know, like how much of that would actually be because as autistics, we've learned that when they say things like, I'm sorry, or, you know, when they ask, how are you today? You know, they don't really mean it. You
right.
know, their intention is just to sort of
Be
kickstart a
polite.
conversation. Yeah. And I don't understand why they don't see why that's an issue either.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
why would you waste the breath to ask something you don't give a shit about? You know what I
Right.
mean? And
Yeah, it's like, why is being polite more important than being real?
yeah, I
It's
mean, you know,
weird.
if I ask you how are you, it's because I care. You know, it
Hmm.
matters to me. I don't know if I can make your day better, or you know, or I can just be like, oh, dude, that's awesome, and actually feel hyped for them or feel sad for them. You know, but I wouldn't ask if it didn't matter. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas it's just sort of, you know, like it's a polite thing, like you were saying. You know, it's just
Yeah,
that
I'm
throwaway
not
line.
polite. I don't
Yeah,
do the social scripts like at all. And I didn't know that I wasn't doing them or that I should be like earlier in my life before I knew about any of this stuff. So I worked in corporate environments and
mm.
I got along really well with the engineers for obvious reasons. And then the higher up people hated me because I treated them like people, not like managers. Right.
Oh,
I respected what they asked me to do. I always did my job. I always listened and did that part, but the rest of it I was very informal and I didn't know
mm.
and nobody explained to me. Nobody said, "Hey, you need to do this stuff," because the pecking order shit doesn't make sense to me. We're all human beings that need to work together to get shit done, you
Yeah,
know. And I had managers that loved that about me, and then I had the ones who really didn't. And
oh yeah, and I mean, I was thinking for a second, like because you didn't say sweet nothings and kiss on their ass, you know, they didn't
right?
like you, you know, because they
Exactly.
expected to be treated better than everybody else because they're better or whatever.
Yeah. And it's just to me, they have their role is like rather than looking at it as a hierarchy, I look at it as like everybody has these different roles that help make a thing work, right? So I
Exactly.
don't see the power structure at all. Like to me, that's relevant. And which, there are a lot of ways that uh, you know, and just so everyone's clear, we're talking about autism, but it's we're being very general in how we think about it because there are autistic people who do think differently and, but like stereotypically when like watching media online or whatever, autistic people talk a lot about like disregarding the hierarchy and just a lot of the social roles just don't really make sense to us. And it's like we can see it's there, but we're like and choose not to participate, right?
Yeah,
Um, and I feel like some of the things that we do and the things that we would need um, to be accommodated are things that would actually make the world better. Being like, hey, you know what? If you're physically uncomfortable because the lights are too bright or it's too cold or there's a weird smell or whatever, it's okay to say so. Because a lot
yeah,
of neurotypicals will be like, oh, that person smelled really bad, but they won't say anything,
yeah. It's
and I'm like, if
it's
you
just
just say something.
right. And I come back to it. Just say the thing. Just say
Yeah,
the thing. That's all you got to
exactly.
do.
I actually have like like a sort of a PTSD response now to saying the thing in certain situations because I've been doing it so much of my life and I've always
Mm,
been the squeaky wheel when no one else would be and I didn't have people who had my back. And after my last job, like now in certain situations when I need to sort of advocate for myself, I'll start shaking. My nervous system goes, no. And my brain isn't actually freaking out. My brain isn't telling me anything bad's going to happen, like at all. It's a physical, like my nervous system is just overwhelmed after all these years of stress because I've just constantly been in these situations where where I'm the squeaky wheel and I end up losing my job or being mistreated because of it. It's like I'm doing the right thing, but the system is not set up to accommodate the right thing. And,
exactly.
you know, and it's like the thing that like dealing with the leak in our roof and the system that's in place for helping get things repaired and stuff, I'm learning that even though we do have these laws in place that in theory are supposed to protect people, they don't actually kick in until things get really bad. Like I'm
Hmm.
trying to preemptively protect myself from health issues from mold, and they're like, yeah, we can't do anything until you can see the mold. And I'm like, but they've just let the leak sit there. It's been almost what, 6 weeks now? It's just been raining and leaking and they haven't done anything. And mold starts within 24 to 48 hours. So why aren't we using facts?
Right.
It's so weird. And everything works that way. There isn't really a good system for things have to get really bad before you can fight for accountability.
Exactly. And it's so weird. Why would you wait until after there's the mold when it's like you could work and do the thing so that we don't have that problem? Because that's the bigger problem, right? That's the next
Right.
step. And you're not there yet, at least that we know of, right? Or we can assume that it is. Why would you wait until it got so bad when,
Right.
I mean, right now it seems reasonable to say it's bad enough. I mean, this is about the leak specifically, but you know, it, I guess you can perhaps address that to other things. It's like, why do people wait until it's like the house is completely like halfway burned before you start
Right.
trying to put out the fire? Like, just put it out before it gets so bad. Like,
Yeah, like the prevention part of things and I just never really have understood that. And it's been so hard for me to navigate the world when I think about things like a couple steps in advance from everyone else. Like nobody cares about it until it's on and it's already too awful for me at that point. It's already done the damage, right? And
right,
then they're like, oh, now we'll care about it. And I'm like, yeah, well, now I'm too tired and broken to sue. So,
right. And it's like they
why did
act
I
like
have to be damaged?
yeah,
Why couldn't we have taken care of this before I got damaged?
exactly. And you would think the building owners would at least give a shit enough to be like, oh, the mold is the worst problem. We can fix this. It might not be the cheapest or, the simplest, but, you know, having the mold is now an additional problem. Why wouldn't you just
Right.
fix the fucking thing before it gets to be that bad? It just doesn't make
Exactly.
sense to me, you know. And you
Plus,
were, go ahead. Sorry.
plus, if it gets to the point that the mold is bad, that means that like the wood has been wet long enough that the wood itself is going to be like damaged and like replacing like at that point by they're supposed to replace the wood and that's like structure stuff, right? So
Yeah,
like that's really expensive. So why wouldn't they at minimum tarp the weekend it was reported?
yeah.
You know,
It's
like they haven't done any of it. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't understand. Like,
exactly. And then it'll get to that point where it's like it's a whole thing, and they're like, "Oh my god, it's going to be a whole thing." Like, yeah, dude. Like I fucking told you it was going to be a whole
right.
thing. Like I told you so, and that
Yeah.
you end up spending so much time going, "I told you that's exactly what would happen," and look, it happened. And
Yep. I think it, I don't say it. I never kick people when they're down. I just go, mm-hmm, you know, but
see,
it
I go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, it's tempting. I just don't. I just it feels mean.
I
It's like,
I have to. It's almost like you know, I know I get no pleasure of it, and it pisses them off. But it's like I told you. Why don't you believe me when I say the things? I'm not. I don't think you're
yeah,
stupid. I'm trying to help here. You know.
yeah. Well, with my housemate, I do it, but that's because like because he does like he knows I mean exactly what I say and he knows that I don't say things unless there's a good reason for it and then he just does other stuff anyways and I'll be like, "But I told you, why did you do that?" He's like, "I don't
Yeah.
know."
Again, it's almost like it goes back to everybody. Well, not everybody, but you know, so many people seem to be so adjusted to the idea that everybody just says things that they don't actually mean. It's just a matter of being polite or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, you know, because you spend so much time sort of adjusting to this idea that people just say throwaway things that they get used to not believing or taking anything seriously. Maybe I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm just spitballing
I
ideas.
can't like I take everything at face value. It's really I have to learn to distrust someone before I'll start to be like, "Oh, they don't mean what they say" or whatever. And then they're a liar.
Yeah,
It's a hard line for me. I'm like, "Oh, that person's a liar. I can't trust them." And,
yeah,
you know, because they're not, you know, like someone who's passive and you're like, "Hey, let's go eat here." And they didn't really want to do that and they don't tell you. Fuck that. That's fucking rude. You know,
exactly.
like what if they were like, actually, I don't want to eat there, and we had a discussion and we found another place and I liked that even better. Like or a place that we both don't mind, or like the idea that's it just oh my God, I hate it. It's the worst. I don't want to
See,
be around people that do that.
I've had relationships where it's almost like trying to find a place to go to eat. It's almost like they're trying to challenge me, you know, because you'll start, well, where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? And it's like, okay, well, how about we go to place A? And they're like, nah, I don't really want to go to place A. Okay, so what about place B? Nah, I don't really want to do that. It's like if you're just setting me up to offer things you can
See,
reject, what's the point in doing
in
this?
that situation, I go, well, you're not hungry, so I'm gonna go home and eat something there.
Okay,
Because if you can't decide, you're not fucking hungry. I mean,
right?
come on. Like,
And again, you know, this is part of my programming where I have to be hyper vigilant to look into people's intentions. You know, I'm thinking to myself, like, are they just fucking with me? Like, you
right.
know, are they have a place in mind. They just don't want to tell me they want to come around to reading their mind and figure it out or what. And it's just like, just tell me the thing, dude. Like,
Yeah.
if I don't want it, I'm going to be like, nah, man, I'm good. Let's
Yeah.
go somewhere else or whatever. Or I can just be totally, you know, complimentary and just say, yeah, let's go there, even if I don't really want to. I mean, you know, because I'll probably find something I actually like, even if it doesn't
Yeah.
sound necessarily great to me at the first place. But
Yeah. And I'll actually be like, I don't really want to go there, but they do have that one dish that I like, so that's not, we can go there if that's what you
yeah,
want. I'll be really honest about it. I don't yeah, I'll mess around with that. I'm picky, so
yeah,
you know, if I legitimately don't know where I want to eat, like sometimes if I get super hungry, I can no longer think about food, and then I'm like, you have to decide, and I will just find something there. And
Yeah.
as long as I can get something without onions, I'm good, you know. And
Right.
that
Right.
was like my ex had a really hard time with that because he never made decisions for anything and he had no opinions about anything. And I was like, no, you're gonna have to. So when I would cook, I'd be like, you have to choose this or that. And he'd be like, like it was hard for him to like,
Yeah.
and it got to the point that he could do it without being like, well, we could do, what if we do this? I mean, if that's what you want, I'm like, no, you just tell me what you want and we're going to do that. Okay. You know, and
Right.
I reinforced it to the point that now like he has opinions and stuff, which
See,
is
training.
good. But yeah,
You had to
I was
learn.
like, yeah, I'm like, you get to take up space, dude.
Right.
I don't want to be the only one taking up space. I want like the other person. I want to be shaped by the people in my life as much as I want to shape the people in my life, you know?
Right. But no, we have autistics have the problem with reciprocity. We don't get that. It's so silly to me. It's like, hey, you talk about like compromise and working together. It's like you and what you want and your needs and stuff and your values, those things matter as much to me as they do to you. Right. So why wouldn't we want to go about that? And I guess some people have trouble with that, but
Yeah,
I don't know
it's
why they do what they do. So,
yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, it's weird. So something you said in the very beginning, and I've been hanging on to it, and I was like, I'm gonna come back to that, was the
right.
talking thing. So I talk like a lot, and growing up, it was like I couldn't help it. Like there's no, it's like I have, you know, some people are nonverbal, I'm hyperverbal, right? So I couldn't, my parents, I drove my parents crazy, and they would be like, you know, if you could be quiet through the next two commercials, because I would, you know, like repeat all the commercials and that kind of thing.
Echolalia,
And
right?
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
And you know, then we'll I don't know, give you a quarter or something like that, you know. But it was like this thing that became like I got in trouble in class. It was always like talks too much and things like that. And so it became like a shame thing
No, yeah.
where I would feel like because I don't get social anxiety before I hang out with people. I do worry about environmental sensory stuff, but I don't worry so much about the social part. I get the social anxiety after because when I'm in a social situation, I'll just talk and I'm not like super aware of the fact that you know, I'm talking a lot because I'm having a good time and,
Yeah,
you know, the dopamine, whatever. But
exactly.
but afterwards my brain will go through and like, oh, you made that sound, you said that thing, but you didn't finish the thought, so they're not going to understand it. And it will like haunt me, right? It's like and and like and I always worry that people don't feel like heard because if I'm just really on a tear,
Hmm.
right? Um so coming around to do the podcast, I didn't realize when I decided to do the podcast because the last decade, my health issues have made me very like quiet in a way that I've never been. Like I used to be a wall bouncer and just could not sit still and having chronic fatigue syndrome. I can't
Hmm.
stim like I used to or anything. So I am very like quiet and still in comparison to how I used to be.
Right.
And so I kind of lost the relationship with the talking part. And because I'm so isolated, I kind of forgot that I talk a lot. And when I started doing the podcasting, it was like, oh yeah, I talk. There's a good reason for me to be doing this. And then it was
Right.
like, I didn't realize that I was going into a project that was allowing me space without shame to do the thing that I do naturally,
Yeah.
right? Because my whole life I've always felt so ashamed of this thing that's just inherent to who I am. It's like, you know, it's just always been there. Um and it's been cool to like as I start to have guests and stuff to be like have them come back after the fact and be like, "Oh, I really had a lot of fun." My brain's like, "Did they really?" And and then and then tell me that I made it easy for them to relax in the chat. You know, I have you know, my therapist jokes that I'm an introvert whisperer because I have a lot of friends who are very quiet, but I get
Hmm.
them going. Um but it's like oh yeah, and I can kind of appreciate this part of myself that I always kind of resented because I felt like it was bad because of how other people reacted to it.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like you were taught to feel ashamed of a thing that's just you, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm listening to you talking, I'm thinking to myself, maybe that's kind of part of it too, right? Maybe it wasn't just that, I had trouble acknowledging that, I was much more social than I thought about. Maybe part of it is that, I did get told in school that, oh, he talks too much, and he socializes too much. It's like, that's if this isn't about socializing, why the hell are there a giant group of kids together in one room?
Right.
Like,
Right.
and especially now, post COVID, they talk about how, well, people talking about education talk about how important that social aspect is in learning. But it's like, when I was a kid, if you were talking to, person next to you or whatever, you would get mad. People would get mad, and it's like,
Yeah.
why can't we talk? I can hear you, and I think that's another thing that neurotypicals don't necessarily understand, is that I can hear somebody else talking, and I can almost hear better if I'm not looking directly at them when they're talking. You know,
Yeah.
and that was something that was really drilled into me as a kid, is eye contact. My dad, man, he he had a lot of ideas. He was a dude. So, but he always used to really drill into me eye contact. And when I started just admitting that I can't hear people as well when I'm doing the eye contact thing, and if I don't look at their eyes and I'm not focusing in on their eyes, I can hear them a lot better.
Yeah.
And once I started doing that, it was like, man, I'm able to communicate so much easier. Uh,
Yep.
and
That's huge. That's huge for me. But I vaguely remember there being some conversations around eye contact, especially when I was being reprimanded. But the problem is I would start laughing, because I don't like when I look at faces, I don't see like a whole face. I see pieces. Thank you for listening. Join me next week for the continuation of this conversation. Want to support my creative chaos and get access to exclusive content? Check out my Patreon. Have a great week.